presentation, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so just like start going when he's ready.
Just start whenever you want to start.
All right, cool. So Sherwin asked us to talk about some misconceptions. So the main one that we're going to be focusing on today is sort of where we are in the fight for LGBT equality and some stereotypes and misconceptions that exist in that. So yeah, let's get started. So especially in like America and CCA, support for the LGBT community is pretty high, and it's been growing a lot recently. If you go to the next slide for just a second, 5.6% of Americans identify as LGBT. So this is an important topic, and this number has been growing for a while, especially because the amount of support has been growing. You can go back to the other slide. So a lot of this has to do with representation in media. So GLAAD is an organization that sort of is a watchdog for LGBT media, and if there's misrepresentation, then they'll speak up and say something. So in 2019, 18.6% of major studio films had an LGBT character, which is pretty good. So, and then we also have a more supportive administration in office. One of the first things that Biden did when he got into office was reverse the trans military ban, which never should have been there in the first place, but it was a good thing that he reversed it. So with all that being said, and also forgot to mention, so 2015 marriage equality was passed in the United States. That means that same-sex marriage was constitutionally guaranteed if you want to get married. So yeah, with all of that being said, it seems like in the movement for LGBT equality, you know, we've got there, we've made it, we have marriage equality, we have all of these things, but there's some things that are still missing. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So you go to the next slide. Or the slide after that, sorry. Yeah. So one of the major issues that it's been in the news a lot recently is anti-trans legislation. And this is specifically in the United States. So yeah, 2020 and 2021 has been a record year for these types of bills. These are mostly passed and introduced in state governments, not necessarily the federal government. And these often target trans youth. And another misconception is that these bills are just being introduced in places like Alabama or Mississippi, but over half the states, over half of the U.S. states have proposed these sorts of bills. So this affects a huge number of people. And there's several types of these bills that are being introduced. One of them is prohibiting trans youth from accessing healthcare. So these are things like puberty blockers and hormone replacement therapy, preventing trans youth from playing on sports teams consistent with their gender identity, religious exemption laws, which they're more broad. They target healthcare for trans people of all ages, but also things like the right to adopt, which actually in the Supreme Court right now, I don't think that they've ruled on it yet, but there's a Supreme Court case called Fulton versus Philadelphia, and that's looking at whether or not adoption agencies have the right to discriminate against same-sex couples. So yeah, hopefully we get a good ruling on that. And then the last type of bill that's being introduced are local control bills. What these do is they prevent the expansion of non-discrimination laws to explicitly protect LGBT people. So this would be discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. And so this is a picture of Chris Mosier. I think I said his name right. Anyways, he is a trans man, and he is in the Olympics for some sort of running. I'm not sure. I think like triathlon or something. But yeah, he does a lot of work with fighting these anti-trans bills, and specifically trans athletes, being an athlete himself. Yeah. Next slide, please. Hi, Maddie.
I can't hear.
Okay, so the next thing that I want to focus on is LGBT students. So the legal protections for LGBT students it's complicated, basically. So the main ones are Title IX and a variety of executive orders. So these change from presidential administration to presidential administration. So like the amount of protection and rights you have at school can change every 4 years because there's no major federal like guidance on this issue, which is a problem. And the lack of federal guidance makes like the rights that you have at school vary wildly between different states and even different counties. You know, you could be at one school and have rights that someone doesn't have like 100 miles away, which is totally unfair. And some of the more specific issues that LGBT students face at school is getting school administration to change names and pronouns in like the school system, access to bathrooms and locker rooms consistent with gender identity, and even being allowed to form clubs like a GSA. Now, being allowed to form a GSA, there is like a law that states that if a school is allowed to have any type of club, then they have to allow a GSA. Not necessarily that they have to have one, but that students are allowed to. But again, different states don't always enforce the laws the same way. So yeah, and then another issue is LGBT issues are often missing from school curriculums, and these are places like history class and health class. In history, like I took APUSH, and like in this whole textbook, there was 3 paragraphs, and it's really sad because when you learn more about the LGBT community, it helps reduce stigma, and like LGBT history is American history, so why isn't it being taught? And then also places like health class, which I mean, sex ed sucks in the United States, but it's even worse for LGBT students. So one step that would help in this issue would be passing the Equality Act. So it expressly protects sexual orientation and gender identity from discrimination in public services. So these are things like housing and employment, which are issues in the LGBT community, but it's specifically in healthcare, education, which is students. And then I included this picture of GLSEN. So GLSEN is an organization that works to combat homophobia and transphobia in K through 12 schools in the United States. And it's a great resource for this sort of thing. Next slide, please. And so the LGBT community is very diverse. There's so many sexualities and gender identities that are a part of the community. But also, an LGBT identity can't be separated from other marginalized identities. You know, you're not just an LGBT person. You could be, I don't know, Black or disabled or things like that. And addressing these other forms of oppression are vital to true LGBT equality because they can't be separated. And one of the main focuses of LGBT activism is to be more intersectional. And one example of this is the progress flag. So that's what's on the screen here. So it's like it's the same rainbow flag. The other one is fine, but then you've got the white, blue, and pink, and that's the trans flag, and then black and brown to represent people of color. And this is just one example of how the community has been pushing for more intersectionality recently. Next slide, please. So some quick action steps for people watching if they want to be a better ally to those in the community. Number 1 is always respect people's pronouns and gender identity. Remember, sex and gender identity are not always the same, and gender expression is not always the same as gender identity. So always be respectful and don't make assumptions about how people identify, because you never know who you're talking to. You never know if someone is straight or cis. So just be nice to people. Finally, educate yourself on LGBT topics. I'm biased. I think LGBT history is really interesting as, GSA president, but I think it's important to stay informed. And then stand up to bullying and discrimination when you see it. Don't let your friends be homophobic. Don't be homophobic yourself. Yeah, that's it. Then there's some sources/resources on the next page. And yeah, that's my presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation. I think like the importance of education has been brought up like multiple times. So I want your input on like how can we help? How can the CCA, for example, CCA students can help other than politicians making laws? How do you think we can help in educating people?
I think just in all, like, well, not all classes. I'm not sure how it could be applicable in all classes, but just trying to get it more in the curriculum. Like I said, like in history class, maybe asking your teacher if you could, like, I don't know, like you're doing a presentation, like present on LGBT topic, things like that. Just exposing this information to more people, I think, is really helpful. And there's so many ways that it can be done in curriculum. So I think, yeah, just pushing for it in curriculum would be great.
I had like
Maggie.
a hypothetical question, and it's something I run into pretty often, and I always never know what to do in this situation. But let's say you need to refer to a person and you aren't able to get this person's pronouns. What is like the right pronoun to use to not assume a pronoun?
Can I have a go at that question? Okay, I would probably say, are you like are you saying in this example like you'd be asking them?
Or no, let's say
Or
I'm talking about someone else, right? With another person, and both of us don't know this person's pronouns, or, you know, we don't know their pronouns. So how do we refer to this person properly?
that depends. I think if you're with the person, obviously, I would politely ask, what are your pronouns?
Hmm.
Because usually people know, they want you to call them by their pronouns, but I don't know, that's a hard one.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
you can
was
always just use they if you don't know. You could always
Yeah,
just
yeah.
okay,
say they.
okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that. Just something I wanted to do.
And then they'll obviously probably correct you.
Uh-huh. I had another question. So Taylor, like I feel okay. So what it sounds like is you know a lot about LGBTQ history, right? Do you have like any examples of like I'm sure you've done World and APUS, right? So like
Hmm.
let's say they're talking about some war or some event in history, right? How would you incorporate it or add on to it with this added history that we haven't been, being taught?
I'm not sure like how like specifically in like wars or something like that.
Maybe not war,
But
but like is their history very separate from what we're learning, or is it close enough that you can incorporate it right there?
no, I would say that especially like in APUSH, like in the civil rights movement, like LGBT rights are an important part of the civil rights movement, but it wasn't included at all in the curriculum that we were taught. Like things like the Stonewall riots, like it was like one sentence. It could be so much more, but it isn't.
Okay, yeah. I haven't taken APUSH, so I actually don't know about that.
Yeah.
Or if there was a way, like we do research papers about a bunch of events in history, if we could do some sort of project on LGBTQ history, that would be good too. Like something about Stonewall riot. Like people make a presentation or something. Just an idea.
See, and that's like exactly why we have this sort of a community because changing the curriculum is really difficult if you haven't noticed. It's really hard to even contact SUHSD. They even if you do contact them, they don't even respond. We know it because some of the clubs that came to us talked about this. So it's really difficult to do that. So that's why I think we need to like start at this student level and then try to move up. Yeah. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, definitely changing the curriculum is, maybe it's not something that I can do, but like I said, like, I don't know, maybe you have to do a book report, like do a book that like features an LGBT character or yeah, like if you're doing a presentation, like somehow like weave the topic in. So just like find ways to present it to your peers, if not necessarily on like a school-wide level or like state level, just like in your classroom.
Yeah. So this is I had this question now. So for example, this is the dilemma I have. Let's say like I'm not an LGBTQ person, but then I've been educated and learned a few things, but I'm a little scared speaking about this in case I say something wrong. This is just my feeling. I say something wrong and it might come out as offensive, you know? So I might not be just as educated as I need to be, but how do you think we can sort of change that perspective of people? So people who are not part of the community speaking up about the community.
I mean, I would say if you have, oh, you can go, Maddie. You can go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can add on after. I think it definitely can be intimidating because people can get defensive about labels, but I think if you just let people know that you're an ally and you're really only trying to help, and I think if you leave it open for people to correct you, that can help too. And just trying your best, because on your first go, people can't expect you to be perfect. Um, as long as you're listening to people, I think that helps.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, like, if I was listening to a presentation and someone definitely had good intentions and they got a couple things wrong, like, I don't think anybody would be offended by that, you know, as long as you go into it, you know, you did your research and you're trying your best to be respectful. Like, it's okay if you get corrected, you know, just go in with it with an open mind and, you know, be open to corrections. But honestly, if you're respectful, I don't think anybody will care.
So that leads to the next question. Do you think the community, let's say at CCA, has a fairly good understanding, or not even understanding, fairly good sense of openness about these topics, or do you think it's becoming more exclusive? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like I'm trying to understand where the trend is going. I'm hypothesizing that the trend is people are becoming more and more open because education is happening. But I'm just wondering what your opinion on this is.
Um, well, I'm a freshman, so I haven't exactly been on campus a lot. But my understanding, I think it is pretty open, and I think most of the teachers and most of the administration are open to hearing ideas of how to help, even if they don't make huge changes. I think things they're willing to maybe try to implement certain things, or at least just listen. And since it's an art school, I think that helps. So in general, the view is a little more inclusive. But like I said, it might be nice to hear from Taylor because she's a senior. But yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely say that CCA is a very welcoming school. You know, I haven't really seen like a lot of like bullying in this case. You know, I have heard people like make homophobic or transphobic remarks on occasion, but it's not a huge issue. And I would say that it's like acceptance is definitely getting a lot better. I've seen a lot with administration as well. Like I've had teachers, not so much my like freshman sophomore year, but my later years, like the teachers ask all of their students their names and pronouns, like things like that. Like that's such an easy thing to do at the beginning of the school. Have everyone fill out a Google form, but it means a lot to LGBT students because it shows you right at the beginning that your teacher is an ally, and something like that is really important. Have you? Oh, I was just wondering. Have any of you guys had like teachers that ask that? Because I've had a few of my teachers that ask that.
Yeah, I've had a few teachers ask that already. And also well, it doesn't relate to CCA, but I think more teachers in general are starting to put that on their Google Forms or whatever, which is good because, like you said, it's really easy and everyone feels a lot more comfortable.
Do you guys know if on Aries they're collecting pronouns? Because I know most of my teachers haven't put out a Google form, but I think when you do Aries stuff, it might ask you for pronouns.
I don't think it does. And where I've seen it come up is, you know, like sometimes you have to do those like welcome surveys. Like they'll just
Yeah.
put it as a question there, like not like a separate survey about it, just like in the introductory questions, like that's just now a standard question that's in there.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, that was interesting. I think I had like maybe one teacher do it. It's still like it's not widespread. It seems it's here and there, sprinkles of here and there. So my question for you is again like circling back to the education part of things is that um what are the so aside from the pronouns, what are the things you want people to know that's very important to be an ally for the LGBTQ community other than the pronouns? What else do you want them to know?
That's a good question. I would just say that honestly, just be respectful. Like it's not that hard to be a good ally. You just just be respectful of people's identities. Don't make fun of people. You know, if someone comes out to you, like be supportive. That's it. I'm not really sure how else to answer that.
I say, what Taylor said is great. I think open acceptance, even if you don't understand it, is a big thing, because if you just say, like, I support you and I'm here for you and I still see you the same way, like nothing's changed, even if you don't fully understand it, and then you can, go and research it if you want to figure it out more for yourself. But it can be really, like, if someone gives themselves a label and it's something you've never heard, I think from firsthand experience it can be really damaging when someone is like, well, don't you just mean this, or that doesn't sound real, or whatever. So just trying to understand is a big thing.
What would you say is like one thing that most people think they know about the LGBTQ LGBTQ community, which is either like not true or misleading or something?
I have one. I think there are a lot of LGBT people who want to spread awareness and talk about it, but I think not everyone does, and I think that's like the general assumption that everyone wants to stand up and be super proud and go to protests and everything, which is great, and a lot of people do, but I think that's not always correct with everyone. Some people just want to, live their lives and have people call them how they want to be called.
Yeah, I think that there's like one stereotype that like all LGBT people are the same, and it's such a diverse community. There's so many different there's a few shared experiences, but there's so many different experiences within the community. So I think understanding that not everyone's like experience is the same is an important thing to recognize, because what one person needs isn't what the same thing that another person needs in terms of like support and acceptance and things like that. So
That's actually interesting. Sorry. Yeah, it's actually interesting. That leads like I thought of this question. So people might think that the LGBTQ community might be like a movement, which, well, in some terms is like a movement, but by movement I mean like a political movement, like Me Too for feminism. I'm just wondering what your thought is. Like, how should people understand? Is it just like a group of people, like, is it just, let's say, Christians, Jews, or, what I'm trying to say? Do you think it's getting very political, or is it just people should understand that it's not all politics, it's not all movements, it's just natural, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think it, LGBT people shouldn't be politicized, but they are. And like I said, with the trans legislation, like, or the anti-trans legislation, like we don't want to be politicized. Like we just want to live our lives, but that's not really an option because of like things like legal discrimination. So as much as we want to have that, we don't. And so that's why it is a political movement as well as an identity, you know.
I think that's another reason someone can have trouble coming out too, is because sometimes it doesn't just feel like a group, but it does feel like a political statement, like, I feel this way about certain things, and yet most people just want to live their lives and don't want to always be going to marches and, be being the presence of clubs and putting posters everywhere. But and I think so. Sometimes I think people have to remember. We have to try to remember that it is a community first, and it's supposed to be uh, it's supposed to be a safe place for people to talk about their experiences and uh, celebrate their differences, not just for power.
So I'm guessing what I'm hearing is that um, everyone wants to be in the community, but because of the situations around them and what's happening, it makes them political. Like they have to be. If they won't be, then this trend is going to continue and it's going to disappear. Am I right about that? Just want to clarify.
Yeah, like when you think of like when you see like a pride parade, like you think of like a celebration, but the first pride was a protest. Like pride is born out of protest. So, it's become politicized. And so that's sort of why like things like this exist, is because we're trying to reverse that.
And one last question, but Biplov, do you have anything else to add?
I think you're good to go.
Okay. So my last question is, how do you? I just want to know more about GSA. So what are some activities you guys do to help sort of make an inclusive or like talk about these issues? Like, sort of, I just want to know what you guys do and whether what effective things you do that might be very helpful in sort of having this inclusive culture.
Yeah, so there's like three main types of GSAs. There's like advocacy GSAs, education GSAs, and support GSAs. And it kind of just depends on who's running the club. And I know it's been different throughout CCA history, but right now it's mostly support and some education as well. Like we have a Discord server that's like mainly for support, and the club on campus, like we meet at lunch, and it's mostly just like a safe place for people to hang out and share their experiences and just be able to be themselves.
Yeah, to my understanding, honestly, especially this year, um, well, yeah, this year we haven't done that much because of COVID, and it is mainly us just talking and sharing and feeling comfortable in the community. But I think maybe Taylor has emailed. Taylor, have you emailed teachers about anything? I feel like we've done something
Yeah,
along the lines of that.
we've done like a little bit of
But
advocacy, but that's not like the main focus of the club right now. Yeah, like I said, it changes. Like what the club is now wasn't what it was 4 years ago, and it's just based on like the needs of the students. Like, do the students need more support now, or are we feeling good and we want to, work on advocacy? So it just depends. And I don't know, especially with COVID, like some people are stuck in unsupportive homes during the pandemic. And so I think that's mostly why it's been mostly support this year. But like I said, it changes. It's just what people need.
and also I think yeah, I think it can be day by day too. Like if everyone is feeling more like let's do a project and let's, use our voices, and then yeah, sometimes people are really struggling and we need to just get our feelings out. So it really depends.
Yep, that's a wonderful thing actually. Like you don't have to advocate all the time, you can just be human and just talk with each other. But thank you so much for coming. We really enjoyed the presentation, and hopefully we'll make some posts about this, educate our peers on what you think, and help spread some inclusion around CCA. But thanks so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course. Hope to see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, let me stop the recording.